Hi everyone, it's Maureen Wong with Your Next Stamp. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card. The tag is mounted on foam tape and you can see that the flourishes on the white panel actually match the flourishes on the black tag. And I think it's a really neat technique, and I have a little trick for how I did it. So I hope you'll watch and I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. Okay, I just wanted to tell you before we start that this is a project that I really love, not just because I designed it, but because I actually designed the dies and stamps that I'm using today. So that's really exciting when you get to play with stuff that basically you had a vision in your head and you put it down and it came to life. Anyway, so we're using the Your Next Stamp Stitch Fishtail Tags 2, and I'm actually going to be using the larger tag. Then I'm using the scribbled alphabet and the flourishes. And let me get out my flourish stamp that I'm going to use. Actually, no, not yet. What I'm going to do first is, okay, and I have my card base, which was a black piece of cardstock cut 3 1/4, and I didn't have to cut the 8 1/2 because that's the size the cardstock was, so I just cut it at 3 1/4, and then I scored at 4 1/4, and so I have this cute little kind of note card thingy going there. And then I have a piece of white cardstock and a piece of black cardstock, and they are both 3 by 4. And what we're going to do first is start by using my anti-static powder bag. I think this is from Stampin' Up! Because we're going to be doing some gold embossing and I don't want that embossing powder sticking everywhere. And now I'm going to take my Versamark ink pad. I've already gotten out the letters T, H, and X from the scribbled alphabet and put them on the block where I wanted them. And now I'm going to ink that up with the Versamark, and I'm going to try and stamp that pretty much in the middle of my 3 by 4 piece of black cardstock. And now I'm taking some gold embossing powder I think I missed a little bit there. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and heat that. Okay, that is all heated, and the gold embossing powder has this extra fine powder, I guess, that gives it that really gold shimmer. So that's what that is all over the cardstock. You can just brush that off. Make sure you let the embossing cool before you touch it. Don't ask me how I know that. But you want to let it cool first, and then you can rub off the excess if you want. But actually what we're going to do is go over this with the anti-static bag first, or again, and then I'm going to take you over to this. This is the tool that I'm using today that is helping me with this technique. And what this is a sticky mat for electronic die cutting machines, and this was a leftover piece from another thing that I used the mat for. I took a brand new 12 by 24 mat and I mounted my Ranger craft sheet on it. That was a tip from Jennifer McGuire, and I cut off the excess cutting mat and the excess craft mat, and now I have my craft mat on this sticky, sturdy surface, and I can move it wherever I want to. When I need to cut, I have my glass cutting mats underneath here, so I can just take this off and do my cutting. I can do all my sponging and everything on my craft sheet. But anyway, I had a piece that was about 6 by 12 left over that I cut off from the 12 by 24 cutting mat, and then what I did was cut it in half. So this is about a 6 by 6 piece, and it's got the adhesive, and I didn't do anything to the adhesive. It wasn't super strong, but if it is, you might want to, you know, stick your hand on it a couple times to take off some of the extra tack if you think it's a little bit too sticky. But the important thing is that it was a brand new mat. I didn't use it for cutting, because when you use it for cutting, it gets all kinds of grooves in it, and it makes the surface extra bumpy. I know that this adhesive surface is a little bit bumpy, but not very much. If you actually use this as a cutting mat, you would get really bumpy, and when you try to stamp on it, it would affect your image. So this was a brand new mat, and I just have this roughly 6 by 6 piece. I also have my Stamp-O-Majig, and what I'm going to do is I am going to position my card, being careful not to touch the corners because that's where I'm going to do some more embossing. And I am just picking this corner right here. You can see there's the handy grid. So I'm picking that corner as my lining up point for this, and then I'm sticking it down so that it, because it's been heated, it's a little bit warped, so I'm sticking it down so I'll have a nice stamping surface. Then what I'm going to do is take my Stamp-O-Majig and I'm going to stick it down to my mat. And it doesn't matter too much where I stick it. I want to put it kind of close by, but not butt it up against the paper, because I know my stamp is going to hang off the edge a little bit, so I don't want that in the way of the stamp. And now I'm going to go ahead and take off my thanks letters because I'm all done with those. And now I'm going to get this particular flourish, which is probably my favorite in the whole set. And then what I'm going to do is, let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see. I'm going to position this swirl where I think I want it to stamp. And what's going to happen is I want it in the corner, kind of like that, and I don't want it to hit the thanks, but I want it to come pretty close. And maybe actually more towards the center of the thanks. So I want it there. And then what I'm going to do is take my acrylic block and use the Stamp-O-Majig as a guide to run my block down and pick up my stamp. And now that is perfectly positioned to stamp exactly where I want it in that corner. And now I want to check and make sure that it works for the other corner as well before I start stamping. So I'm going to reposition this upside down at that same exact corner that I used before. And then I'm going to put my stamp down, and actually that is a little bit far from my thanks, but I think that's going to work just fine. And now I can go ahead and I'm going to smash that down to make sure it sticks. And now I'm going to go ahead and ink up my flourish with my Versamark pad and go ahead and stamp it in that corner. Then I'm going to remove it, turn it around, reposition it exactly in that corner. And the key to this is making sure that you reposition it in that same gridded corner exactly the same every time. And it shouldn't be too hard because it's a really easy to use grid. And as far as I'm aware, all of the different brands of sticky cutting mats have the grid lines like that. And I'm gonna go ahead and stamp again, and then take my piece off, and I'll get my gold embossing powder out again and put that over my flourishes. And actually what I'm going to do right now is save a little bit of time, and instead of heating it, I'm just going to put that off to the side and heat that later. And now what I'm going to do is bring in my white cardstock, and I also want to treat it because the gold can stick everywhere on this one too. And it's the same thing. And you can see, because my Stamp-O-Majig is on the sticky mat, it hasn't moved. No matter if I move this whole piece to the side, if I accidentally drop it on the floor, or anything like that, it's not going to move because the Stamp-O-Majig is stuck down. And so again, with the white cardstock, the same thing. I'm going to put it in that same corner, the exact same way. And I'm going to ink up my flourish and stamp that. Then I'm going to turn it around exactly the same way in that corner. Make sure it's all squared up so I know that's the same. And then I'm going to stamp with my Versamark ink again. And put on my powder. Okay, and I'm going to heat both of these, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Here we go. We have the two 3x4 pieces of cardstock that have the exact same swirl stamps, and then the black one has the thanks in the middle. And now what we're going to do is get out our Stitch Fitch tail tags 2, the larger one, and we're going to figure out where we want to cut this. And there are a couple of ways to do it. Because this doesn't have an open center, if you just do it this way, you're kind of guessing, but that's not that bad in this situation. You can kind of see where everything is. And let me just, there's my T, there's my X. I want to make sure it's straight. And what I'm going to do is get a pencil and draw lines around the edges. And I'm going to see. That looks pretty good. Kind of evenly spaced. I want to move it over just a tiny, tiny little bit. So it's going to be there. And then I'm going to draw a line here showing this is where the bottom is and here's where the top is. So yeah, that looks good. I'm just going to put my die back where I had it. And then I'm going to stick it down with some used not so sticky tape and run this through my die cut machine. Hi, I'm back, and I actually did not cut the die out of my piece of cardstock because I thought that some people might not like that guessing, position and guess and draw lines and guess some more kind of method of positioning it. So what I did was I got a piece of scrap cardstock and I cut a slit in the top, but I'm going to put a piece of washi there to hold it together. Actually have to make sure it's together. I'm just going to put a little piece of washi there and you'll see why. And in case you're wondering, I got this tip from Jennifer McGuire, so no, I'm not a genius. Jennifer McGuire definitely is a stamping genius. She came up with this method. So what I'm going to do is position this template where I think I want it to cut out, and I can see I get a nice bit of both of those swirls. And then I'm going to put my die in, and it's going to fall right into the opening. And I can see I can try and wiggle it. It's not moving. And now I'm going to take off this washi tape, and I'm holding down my die very firmly. And I'm going to take off my template, holding down this die very firmly to make sure it doesn't move, and then I'm going to take some not so sticky but sticky enough tape that I keep around just for die cutting this kind of stuff and stick it down, and now I am going to go take it to my die cutting machine and cut it out. Okay, I ran it through my die cutting machine and here it is. And you can see that the THX is nicely centered, and I have the little bits of the swirls at the edges. So what happens now is you can see that when you do this, you can actually line up the swirls, and they line up perfectly because of the method that I used with the sticky cutting mat. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of twine, I have a little bit of gold twine here, oops. And I'm just gonna take 2 strands of that and then put them through my tag. And this does not want to go through. It's always on camera when this stuff happens, because you know when you do this stuff off camera it just goes in really easily. So let me try and fix this a little bit here. Okay, and now I can take the ends through, and I have my tag all twined up. I'm gonna cut off the extra. Now I'm gonna go back and take that card base. Oh, sorry, I have to get my glue. Be right back. I said glue, but I meant my ATG gun. So I'm going to stick down a piece of white cardstock with my ATG, and this is how I like to attach layers. I like to put it down and look at it and see that all 4 are as close to centered, all 4 sides are as close to centered as can be, and stick that down. And then I'm going to take some foam tape and put it on the back of my tag. Actually, I think I want to put a piece in the middle just to make sure it doesn't sag. Okay. And now this is a trick that I got from Jiggly Ebersol, who got it from someone else, and I don't remember who that was. I'm sorry. I think it might have been Sherry Carroll. But you just, when you have multiple pieces of foam tape, you just take off one piece, and so it's not as sticky, so that we can line up the swirls perfectly. Okay. And now the bottom. So we're going to line up both the top and bottom swirls as best as we can. And you see, because you've only pulled off that one piece of backing, it's not super sticky, and it's actually a little bit movable. And then when you have it down, the swirls match on both the top and the bottom, you can go ahead and remove the extra liners and then really stick that down. And there is your finish thank you card. I hope you liked this project, and I hope you will check out yournextstamp.com for the dies and stamps that I used today, and hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.